We are concerned not merely with the technical problem of securing and maintaining peace, but also with the important task of education and enlightenment.
You sort of stole my next question, which goes to the idea that you brought up, that if a very advanced civilization were to come here and crash, doesn't make any sense, or the fact that they would not have recovered their own craft immediately, because if we have a craft down, and my father was with accident investigation in the Canadian government, and I know he talked about the one time a U-2 was down, that the American military was there before the Canadians got there. So this goes to the question of, you mentioned this thing about the gifting, and in a recent interview, Bob Bigelow, who's a friend of yours, was being interviewed by George Knapp, and he was asked about Roswell, and he said, well, yeah, there's Roswell, and I think there was one in Russia, and there was one in China, and there was one in South America, and I think they're seeding them. And Tyler D., who I think you also know, referred to this other crash site in New Mexico as the gifting field. And this goes to your little pieces of metal, which also don't make sense to me, is that little pieces of metal are falling out of the sky, that this advanced craft comes from wherever it's coming from, and then little pieces start falling off it, where you get the memory metal that you couldn't bend with a sledgehammer. It would deflect bullets, but when it hits the ground, it shatters like a wine glass. It sort of gives the indication that we are being gifted this material. Do you believe that there may be part of that we are being given some assistance in terms of understanding that we aren't alone and that the world is more complex than we think it is?
I think I may have been the one who started that idea that it was a donation, that they dangle something. I mean, look at what we can do, because on the last day, let's jump to the last day. Now, the thing has been recovered after bringing an 18-wheeler to recover the weather balloon and building a special crane to lift the thing and put it on the truck. They put it on the lowboy that's behind the truck, and they put it sideways. Well, why sideways? Well, it's egg-shaped, and if it's upside, if it's up, it's not going to go under the overpass on the highway to take it back to White Sands. So they put it sideways. And then everything is under top, and the soldiers are happy. They go to the local bar. Nothing can happen to it, except that the two kids are still there. And they say, we need a souvenir. Now, when I spoke, with Paola, we spoke to Mr. Padilla, whom we've gotten to know very well by now, after a few years. That idea of a souvenir, I mean, why a souvenir? Why was it so important? Well, in every family, there were people who were not coming back from Germany, or not coming back from Poland, not coming back from other places around the world, in Japan and so on. So souvenirs were very important. If you had something that had belonged to the father, to the uncle, to someone in your family, your brother, you wanted to keep something, it was very important. That was the only thing that you would get back. And so the kids knew that, and they wanted to get a souvenir, so they went inside. In fact, this is also the only case where 3 people have gone inside a UFO, an empty craft, without being abducted, to investigate it, to measure it, to see what it was made of, what it was like inside. Now, the last day, it's sideways, so the kids can see under the thing. The thing is about 15 feet high, okay? And where Mr. Padilla was walking as a kid, when he went inside, he said that the height was about 12 to 13 feet. I asked, well, how did you know that? I mean, you were a 9-year-old, how do you know? Well, he said, that's the size of a beam. If you build a new house, the size of the average beam. Well, these kids were smart. They were smart because they grew up by themselves in the middle of a war. They had to take responsibility for what they did. You know, they were not playing around. They were not doing what, you know, your kids or my kids are doing. They had to work. They had to serve. They had to, and so we know those dimensions pretty well. Well, under the floor, which was flat, there was another 3 feet. Well, what was in there? I mean, if you're looking for where the propulsion system is, which I think that's what, you know, people in those different agencies are looking for right now, you know, there was no opening. There was just about 3 feet by something like 10 feet maybe of space where, if we think of it as a propulsion system, it had to be there. And there are no openings, and there is no smoke coming out. There is no sound coming out of it. You know, what was it? You know, what can we learn from this? Okay, so those are some of the questions. So as Paola and I, you know, when we talk about the case, we're very aware of the fact that this book is just the beginning. It's not the end of an investigation.
So what happened? So what happened? And I'll add, Jacques, the little boy walked in. He wanted a souvenir, and what he saw was a plaque on the wall, and the plaque looked like he didn't see any nails or anything, and it had a round circle that looked like copper. In the middle was this, what Jacques and I call a bracket. It looked like some kind of handle or whatever, and it would rotate. And so that is what Jose, and it was just Jose that went inside, because Remy handed him the crowbar to pull the bracket off the inside. What's unique about this case is that we have the witnesses, the location, and a substantial piece of metal. When I first started working with them, I had seen the bracket in Gig Harbor, Washington, at the home of Remy Baca. Who had been there was Timothy Good. So Timothy Good had this case in his book, plus he had done some analysis on the bracket. The other person that mentioned this case, and we want to give credit to, is Ryan Wood, who has the book Magic Eyes Only, that has 93 cases. That book is, for me, a reference book. So Jacques and I looked at that because 1945 is in there. So we have this piece of metal called the bracket. And then when Remy passes on, Jose gets the bracket. And I'm working with this thing, and I put it in a safe deposit box here in Colorado. And because he gifts it to me, he gives me gifts. He gave me that gift. When I met Jacques, I gave him, quote unquote, the bracket. And that is what, you know, it's amazing that you haven't gone there, because most of the UFO researchers, all they care about is the metal and the bracket. But let me add one thing, Jacques. I have here a souvenir. This is the cane of Mama Grande, the Apache. It says Maria Amanda Chavez, because what Jose gave to me is her cane, and what he gave to Jacques as a souvenir, because they believe in souvenirs, is a rain stick from the Apache and a series of cufflinks that have, what do you call it, pistols on them. This is how these people think. So, you know, for me to have this, to have had the bracket, and then I gave it to Jacques, and you can ask the metal questions now if you want to.
Yeah.
You know,
I can speak to the fact that I've actually handled it. If you recall, I was in Boulder and we went to those people's house, and he said, where am I hiding it? And I said, I don't know where you're hiding it. And he pulled it out of the back of a TV. He had it hidden in the on the back of the TV. Remember that?
Husband.
So let's go to the bracket. Is that and let's clarify, is that the only piece of hardware? I heard one interview you guys were doing that indicated you might have more than something else.
Well, I think we'll keep it vague.
Okay.
Because of there's a long history of things appearing and disappearing in various ways. So you know, to be completely truthful, I would say we don't know what we have. Okay, people have already told us what it was. Okay, that it's an ordinary piece of industrial thing. It's worth nothing and so on. It shouldn't have been there, or they think of some retro gravity invention and so on. We don't know, and that's the most important thing that a scientist can say, is we don't know, because if we knew, there wouldn't be any point to do research. We really don't know what we have. The